Welcome to the show. I'm Tom Lobianco. It's Monday, September 29th, in the year of our Lord, 2025. Coming up a little bit later today, just a few minutes, my chat with Democratic National Committee Vice Chair Shasti Conrad. She has just joined the top ranks of the Democratic Party and is also the head of their Asian American Pacific Islander, AAPI, outreach and efforts. She has an update on what the Democrats are doing to capitalize on this moment of chaos and try to put more Democrats in office, specifically by trying to win back Asian American voters. Reminder, if you're catching us here live today on Substack and YouTube, you can drop in comments. I'm not going to get to them today. Ian Walters, our producer, is out on paternity leave, having a wonderful time with baby number 5. So big congrats again to the Walters family. You can always reply to the email at 24site.news. Shoot over a reply if you get this after the show. I'll see that. And you can also drop a note to me at tom@24site.news if there's anything or anybody you'd like to see us cover here. We do this daily, Monday through Friday at noon. Drop a note. I'll take a look at it. All right. So let's get to our top headlines today. Before we do that, we're going to ease into it just a little bit. Okay. What's this? Is this a new Hollywood star? Not likely. Or maybe. I don't know. I have to tell you, I was reading this at the top of Drudge today and flummoxed by it. So this is out of Metro in Britain. Big ups to the British newspapers. They've been doing some great coverage of what's happening here. Thank God they are. Headline: Hollywood hits back as AI actress is hailed as the next Scarlett Johansson. Byline: Emily Bashforth. The woman you see above might look as real as any other human, but she's not. She's actually an artificial intelligence generated actress named Tilly Norwood, who after a short time on the scene has sparked interest among talent agents who are keen to hire her. As such, she's been hailed as the quote, the next Scarlett Johansson or Natalie Portman, sparking outrage from big names in Hollywood who are branding it gross and expressing outrage toward the agencies who wish to sign her. The sign has led to this has led to the creator of Tilly firing back, insisting that the digital actress is not a replacement for a human being. Talking to Instagram comedian and technologist Aline Vandervelden wrote, "To those who have expressed anger over the creation of my AI character, Tilly Norwood, she is not a replacement for a human being, but a creative work, a piece of art. Like many forms of art before her, she sparks conversation, and that shows itself the power of creativity." All right, there's Tilly Norwood, not replacing Natalie Portman or Scarlett Johansson sometime soon. I guess we're going to find out here. Okay. Well, let's get to the heavy stuff. Okay. Look, guys, you know me. You know what I say about this. I'm a longtime reporter, and I say take your time before making judgments before you know information. Now, this would go doubly for the President of the United States of America when it comes to anything, but especially when it comes to shootings. All right. What do we know? What do we know about these things? Terrible shooting in suburban Detroit yesterday in a Mormon church. 4 dead, 8 were injured. The man who did this, a Marine, Thomas Jacob Sanford, was killed by authorities in that. Recall that we are living in the time of the White House and the government saying that political violence must be dealt with because of the shooting of Charlie Kirk just a little bit over 2 weeks ago. All right. So I would note in the rush to judgment there was not even any evidence yet on who the suspect was. Abnormal for most of us normal folks, normal for this White House. All right. Most people can roll their eyes at it, with the exception that it's the President of the United States who is using the full force of the government to bear on this. All right. As we are now seeing promises, I would note, to deem political groups which he does not agree with, quote, terrorist organizations, to attempt to use the full weight of the federal government to attack political groups he does not agree with. The latest being George Soros Foundation, long previously a political target, but now potentially an investigative target from the government itself. All right. Which brings us to our apparent shooter at the Mormon church who had a Trump sign outside of his house. Now, does this mean that all Trump supporters are violent insurrectionists trying to murder people at church? No. Of course it doesn't. Why would it mean that? I mean, does the Charlie Kirk shooting mean that everybody who plays a video game or is dates a transgender furry is a homicidal maniac? No. Why would it mean that either? It doesn't mean any of these things. All right. Here's The Guardian. Headline: Mormon church shooting suspect had Trump sign outside a home. Google Maps images show suspect who was shot dead by police had Trump sign outside his Michigan house. By Ed Pilkington. The gunman who killed at least 4 worshipers, wounded 8, and was shot to death by police Sunday at a Mormon church in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, had a sign emblazoned with the name of Donald Trump outside his house, public records show. The president responded to the church shooting on Sunday by saying, quote, "There is still a lot to learn," end quote, about the deceased suspect, identified as 40-year-old Thomas Jacob Sanford. Quote, "This appears to be yet another targeted attack on Christians in the United States," Trump said in a post to Truth Social, his platform. Trump's comments were notably calm and measured compared with his remarks following the killing of the right-wing activist Charlie Kirk in Utah 18 days earlier, when the president rushed to blame, quote, "the radical left" for the murder and was echoed by his allies. A suspect is in custody in connection with the shooting and faces charges that carry the death penalty. All right. Now, let's get to another shooting. Sadly, we have a lot of mass shootings, fatal mass shootings. This one, CNN, North Carolina. Headline: Marine veteran in custody after 3 killed, at least 8 injured in shooting at a waterfront bar in North Carolina, officials say. Byline: Hannah Park and Zoe Soddle. A 40-year-old Marine veteran who pulled up to a waterfront North Carolina bar by boat fatally shot 3 people Saturday night, authorities say, shattering the peaceful atmosphere of a community rarely touched by violent crime. Out-of-towners were enjoying the warm weather and music on an outdoor deck at the American Fish Company in Southport, a small and tranquil city near the mouth of the Cape Fear River, when gunshots rang out. 8 people were injured, and at least 1 victim is now clinging for their life. John David, district attorney for North Carolina's Judicial District 5, said at a Sunday morning news conference. Nigel Edge, who received a Purple Heart for his service in Iraq, was arrested Sunday and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 5 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. Southport Police Chief Todd Coring said Sunday. Police think Edge acted alone and said the attack was, quote, highly premeditated. CNN is working to identify whether Edge has an attorney. Additional charges are still possible, Coring said. Edge was taken into custody when the U.S. Coast Guard encountered his boat after the attack, according to Oak Island Police Chief Charles A. Morris II. This course will be developing. We will be following developments in both these cases, just as we are following developments here in the ICE shooting in Dallas last week. Any developments in the Charlie Kirk case, any future shootings, sadly, it happens way too often. But what do we know about this? Is there some kind of thread, a pattern to discern here? Not that I can see. And I guess I'd be careful of anybody who tells you there is a pattern, including the president. I mean, hell, the president himself even seems to have caught himself when the shooter had one of his campaign signs outside of his house. We don't know. Is it political violence? Is it religious violence? Those of us old enough to remember the Iraq War, we used to hear the stories of sectarian violence. All right, so is this Christian on Christian violence? We don't know, guys. We don't know. I'm just going to keep on saying this every time we get one of these, and I'm going to keep on saying it more every time the White House says something that is demonstrably bullshit, because they're pressing real hard to use any of these as an excuse to attack political opponents, which is un-American. So keep it here, guys. All right, I'm going to bring on Shasti Conrad here. A little bit about Shasti. We chatted before, so this is pre-taped. You may notice a slight change in my clothing. That's because we pre-recorded this interview. Shasti is the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. We talked about her efforts and the DNC's larger efforts, not only to win back Asian American voters, because if you remember, in 2024, there was a major shift rightward by Asian Americans, one of the largest growing voting blocs in America. This is really big. Now, you'll recall last week I had on Mike Madrid, who's a longtime Latino voting expert. He had some surprises for us there. Shasti has some surprises for us with regards to Asian Americans, especially as we head into Virginia and New Jersey's elections, but also some pretty interesting reveals on how Democrats are changing things up heading into these elections and future elections, especially the midterms coming in just over a year. All right, joining me now, guys, Shasti Conrad, Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee. Shasti, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So, did you get any rest over the weekend?
No. Unfortunately, living in Trump's America means you never sleep.
Oy.
Yeah, exactly.
Never ends. It never ends. But we keep doing it, which is
That's
important.
Right. That's right.
So, Shasti, tell us a bit about your background, because I wanted to get you on the show because I think you have some unique insights into voter sentiments, which are really important.
Yes. So I was recently elected as a vice chair to the DNC. I'm the only DNC officer that is from the Asian American community, and also the only one that's living in the West. I'm also the chair of the Washington State Democrats, and have been leading our state party out here since 2023. We were the only state in the country that went more blue when you include our statewide electeds last year, and have the longest run of Democratic governor in the country right now. Over 40 years, we've had Democratic governors in our state. And before getting involved in the party, I worked in the Obama administration, worked for his senior advisor, Valerie Jarrett, during the first term, and have worked on 4 presidential campaigns, and, just have been in this, trying to fight the good fight. And, here we are.
Have you ever thought about getting a job that doesn't exhaust you to death, that like is normal, makes a lot of money? Like
Well, yeah,
I
what is
think
that,
about that
Tom?
sometimes. I don't know. Oh God, I don't know. Lobbying for Armenians, like the Trump people. That seems
Right?
to be very lucrative these days.
Yeah, yeah. I know, but what fun would that be, right?
Right, exactly.
It's a laughing minute over here in failing democracy.
So so you've done a lot of work with shorthand we would say AAPI, but for folks that's Asian American Pacific Islander. Um, and I was really interested when we got connected because I remember last year there was a really striking shift among voters, or it seemed to be a shift among AAPI voters rightward. I mean, what happened in
Mhm.
2024?
Well, I think our Asian American community was like many other communities. We certainly weren't the only one that the Republicans did a better job than I think we did it on the Democratic side of really infiltrating into spaces like into our temples, into mosques, into coming into like small businesses, and really stoking a lot of fears, right? Like really driving up a sense of crime was rampant, that Democrats were going to tax everybody to death, and just that everything was going bad and that we needed change, and that worked on the Asian American community as well. I think a lot of people don't know that the Asian American community in the United States is the fastest growing demographic,
Hmm.
and we are actually the fastest growing demographic in really key states in the South, like in Texas, like in North Carolina, which is where we're going to see our sort of biggest population shifts over the next couple of years. And it's we are a big part of that driver. We're also one of the most stratified communities in the country, where we have some of the wealthiest people who are I know we're going to talk about H-1B visas. Many of them have come in and they've worked in the tech spaces and are doing incredibly well, but you also have people that are nail salon techs and are nurses, and they are small business owners, but they're struggling, like, so you have a real big spectrum of people within our community who are experiencing the same sort of fears around the economy and around safety that many people were feeling, particularly last year.
Yeah, and that's it's a great point because we refer to, at least in the media, often will refer to voter blocks as some sort of monolith, and it's really, I mean, anytime you're talking about tens of millions of anybody,
Right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and our community is interesting too because of the way in which people come into the United States.
Hmm.
Their connection to their own, back home governments and their experiences
Hmm.
with, you know, communism and with authoritarianism. The experience of people coming in from China is different than it is people coming in from India, for instance, and people coming in from Vietnam and their experience of American imperialism in their home country. So that also plays a big role in how Asian Americans sort of interpret politics and think about the moment that we're in, think about government, think about democracy. And so we are definitely not a monolith, and you see that in both our sort of consumer patterns, but also certainly how we vote. And I think it's very important that as we are this growing demographic, we often are the difference makers in elections.
Hmm.
Just a couple years ago in Georgia, when we had the Senate races with both John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, it really was our community in Georgia that made the difference to help them get across the finish line. And some of my favorite new organizing tactics happened in those races, where we had folks that were hacking the family group chats, where young people were going into their family WhatsApp chats and things like that, and feeding talking points about what was happening, and the good points about
Yeah.
Ossoff and Warnock and whatnot, and it made a difference. It really did. So important.
Let me ask you about that, because I mean, one of the big things, and this is one of the big critique of the Democrats coming out of last year, was that the party up and down the ballot, statewide, nationally, was just seemed to be completely out of touch with the way that people interact. Right, when you had the Trump campaign going on TikTok, showing up on the podcast, I mean, this was one of the big takeaways from 2024. I mean, what is the DNC doing right now, and the Democrats writ large doing to change that? I mean, how are you addressing that?
Definitely. I mean, I think that was probably one of the biggest lessons that we, learned coming out of 2024, was that the Republicans did a much better job at, figuring out that people were getting their information not through traditional means and not through just like political sources, right? They were getting them through lifestyle podcasts and things like that. And also that they were getting it from their friends and from their family members, and conversations that were being had outside of just sort of the candidate or a campaign. We in the DNC just announced a big investment in bilingual organizing, particularly for the Latino community, and really focusing on development in these particular communities and making sure that we are speaking directly to people and that we're amplifying trusted community leaders, that we are making sure that, that we're building trust with people and that we're doing it in a way that people feel comfortable. I think the other big lesson that, we learned was we tried to make everybody feel important and divided a lot of people, right? There was, sort of the African Americans for Kamala and AAPIs for Kamala and Latinos for Kamala and women for Kamala, all of this stuff. And, I think there's an important space to do that type of constituency organizing. But I think also we have to have a cohesive message as, Democrats that is going to cut across everybody, that is about affordability, that is about, connecting with people on kitchen table issues. All of that's really important.
What are and Shasti? One of the things I wanted to talk about is we have again our two big elections now, right, in Virginia and New Jersey. What are you seeing down there, right? Because this is the first big test, right? We always say in politics that you can have any all number of polls and they'll tell you anything, but the only poll that matters is Election Day. So what are you seeing?
Yes, so I actually went and visited both Virginia and New Jersey just a month ago at the end of August, where I held 2 AAPI town halls specifically to engage our Asian American community, because in both states, they are sizable populations. In Virginia, we are the second largest constituency group, second to African Americans, but actually there's more Asian Americans in Virginia than even Latinos. And in New Jersey, there's 1 million Asian American Pacific Islanders in New Jersey. So, really important voting blocks, in both of those states. These are our two biggest races this year, and, trying to, flip a governor's seat in Virginia and hold on, with a new candidate in New Jersey, but hoping to keep that in Democratic hands. And on the ground, I think, folks are both wanting to show that this is a opportunity to push back on the Trump administration and Trump's agenda and the Republicans. And, we are testing new messaging, testing new organizing tools. You see that energy. But I think there's also that fear, certainly, particularly in New Jersey. I heard a lot of people talk about the fact that, how can we trust that, Democrats have been in leadership for, I think 8 years, and how are we, that's not typical that a Democrat will win again. And there's a lot of misinformation being pushed by the Republicans related to, Mikey Sherrill's military record and about, sort of what Democrats are bringing to the table. And there's a lot of fear of what people believe and what will motivate them to get out and vote. And so I think, in both states, we have to do everything we can to make sure we're connecting with people, that we are reminding them how important it is, and that this is an opportunity to really show Trump and, the MAGA crowd that we are not going to capitulate, that we are not okay with what is happening. And, particularly in Virginia, you have a lot of federal workers who live there, and many of them lost their jobs and have been deeply impacted by directly what is happening, in DC. And so this is a real opportunity to show that fight and push back.
There's been a lot of this year, and certainly in response to everything that we've seen from the second Trump administration, via illegal firings, sending people to effectively a South American gulag, the CCOT down in El Salvador, you name it, and the political prosecutions. There has been, certainly at these town halls, a push from not just Democrats, I would know, but just regular folks, all right, just very angry, who want the Democrats to do more. I mean, do you think that if the Republicans are just making stuff up, and I would not advocate for making anything up because I'm a reporter, but is it fair for Democrats to do that? Is it fair then? I mean, is that the right way to handle it? Right, to say, all right, well, Mikey Sherrill, had fake military service. Well, Jack Chattarelli, was whatever, is a communist, or you name it. I have no evidence of any of this, I should note. But I mean, does that become a fair tactic?
Well, I mean, I think, this is sometimes our challenge on the Democratic side, which is like, we actually believe in rule of law. We believe in telling the truth. I think that, you need to build trust with people, which means that you need to always be honest and be direct about that. And I think, it is about meeting the moment and showing the fight. I think that we as Democrats, I think everybody was a little bit stunned at the beginning of this year, and we're a little too slow in, sort of responding to the onslaught of what was coming from the Trump administration. I do feel like in the last, couple of months, we have seen that change on our side. We've seen more of a recognition of nothing is normal. We can't act like business as usual. We have to be ready to fight. I took a lot of inspiration from, the Texas House Dems breaking quorum, and really showing that, we have to take these things seriously and, fight fire with fire. And, you're seeing what Gavin Newsom is doing out in California. So, I think, this energy of we have to fight back, I think Democrats are starting to really understand that and understand. And we're seeing, a different way of leadership, even right now with the government shutdown discussions. And again, like not perfectly, but I do think that, it does, to me, feel different in recognizing how we have to fight back and talk about, the devastating healthcare cuts that are going to come out of this Republican budget, and, that the Republicans have to own this government shutdown. That messaging wasn't as strong as it was, just 6 months ago.
Do you think, as because we are facing a potential shutdown here this week, is it your sense that the Senate Democrats should go to a shutdown if there's not an agreement to stop the doubling of healthcare costs?
I mean, I know in every conversation I've ever had with our electeds that they take, a shutdown very, very seriously because of who it all impacts. It impacts, thousands of government workers and, people's resources to medical care, things that people don't even realize that the government is running. When things get shut down, it has this deep impact. So I know that it's never taken lightly, but at the same time, I think the American people kind of want to call Republicans bluff here. Like, I think that, they want to see that, we're not going to just let them run roughshod over, the American people and what's in our best interest, just because this is the threat that they're going to continue to make. And they're, I think back in the spring, they were more effective at trying to make it look like it was Democrats, even though we don't have the power, that it was on Democrats. I feel like right now, the fractures that are happening in the Republican Party, I think they've overplayed their hand. And I think that, I think people know. I think people are seeing that this is being driven by, MAGA Mike Johnson and by the Republicans, and that they are going to have to own this shutdown.
How and if that happens, right? If we get to that point, how's the DNC going to be messaging this? What's the battle plan?
I mean, I think it is just to continue to say, like, this is Republicans were willing to shut down the government as a way to protect billionaires and to, like, make sure they were helping the, 1%. And, while also wanting to devastate, by major healthcare cuts. And, they don't care about you, which is, what I've generally felt. I'm 40 years old, and, in my entire lifetime, I've only felt that there was one party who cared about, my humanity. And, the Democratic Party is, not perfect, but at least I feel like they're willing to fight for people like me who, are just trying to get by and take care of family and, sort of live a good life here and, not just protect the millionaires and billionaires.
I wanted to ask you, we had this recent announcement from Trump that with the H-1B visas, which, I mean, just of the many things which are stunning, like why? Like what? Like just why?
I know.
$100,000, and apparently not just a one-off cost, but every year, which is really astounding. What are you hearing from folks? When you're out there talking with, I know you did the town halls at the end of August, so just before this, but what are you hearing from folks since the announcement of these visas?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like so much of Trump, right? I mean, it was also just the chaos of the rollout. I'm sure you saw, the same things I saw of the, like, I think it was an Air India flight, right? Where people were trying to, were being told, don't get on this plane, or, the plane has to land before midnight, because if you get off this plane and it's, the next day, then you're going to owe $100,000. And, people didn't know whether it impacted them if they'd already had, been in this country, or whether it was only for new people. And then the, Trump administration had to roll it back to say, oh no, it's only just for new people, and I think, again, they just overplayed their hands, because, it turns out that it's not just, Democrats who benefit from immigrants. It's big business, it's small businesses. Many of the tech companies are, their success is really on the backs of, immigrants, and a lot of them are people from my community, that are Asian Americans. And they want those people there. They want people who are leaders in computer science and engineering, and all of these sort of important trades here in the United States. So yeah, I mean, I think people were angry. I think people were frustrated. I think people were afraid. I think there was so much confusion and chaos about what this meant and the impact that it would be on people. And I think that it's not just the immigrant community that was being impacted. It was truly, so many businesses that were just like, what the hell? This is, that's not what we want. So, it was pretty frustrating, and follows a lot of this chaos that is coming from Trump and the Republicans, which is that Trump has an idea, and suddenly it's a thing, but no one's thought about the actual process for implementation or who else it impacts. And, this is the chaos of living in Trump's America.
Do you, I mean, we're pretty similar age. I'm 43. We're both old enough to remember when, quote unquote, big tech used to work really closely with Democrats and really not so directly aligned with one party as they were, looking at, as Biden himself said it in his exit speech, the new oligarchy, the tech oligarchs, right? Whether it's Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, who I recall there was supposed to be a cage fight between those two at some point.
Yeah,
I'm still waiting for it.
right.
I just, what does it take to get a cage fight these days? Really?
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, are the Democrats able to get these folks back?
Mhm.
Because I mean, there was a time where tech was more friendly with the Democratic Party, or at least not as solely in line with somebody who's trying to be a dictator, which is our president. Right? He's
Right.
behaving like that. I would note
Yes.
we are not a dictatorship. We're America. We have a constitution. We have courts. But all right, like I mean, any sense that maybe Zuckerberg might come back, or even some of the more normal ones like Tim Cook. Where is that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in Oregon, and Intel was one of our biggest, companies in the state, and the talk of Trump just taking 15% of the company. I was hearing from friends and family and whatnot down there that were just horrified and couldn't believe that, like, in the United States of America, that the president could just claim that he was just going to take some of the of a major company, right? And so I do think that some of those people, who oftentimes I hear from people in these kind of tech spaces of,
Hmm.
I'm just doing my job, right? Politics doesn't matter to me. It's not important. I'm got my job and I'm making my money, and that's sort of where my focus is. I think people are realizing that, if you don't pay attention to politics, like, it does have an impact on you. And especially right now, this administration is, changing up, people's livelihoods and what they're able to do and get done. And that chaos, like the H-1B visas, is not anything that's helpful. So my hope, but I think unfortunately many of these sort of what did Biden call them, like techno fascists, right? These like
Yeah.
these leaders of these big companies, especially companies that have major like social media platforms,
Yeah.
they're going where they see the power, and
Mm.
that is these algorithms feed into sort of, I think, the backsliding into
Yeah.
authoritarianism because of the echo chambers that they are able to create, in the way in which they're able to push disinformation and misinformation and have that not be fact checked, which used to be a big part of Twitter, and some of these was that fact checking. They had whole teams of people that were working on human rights policies and verifications and things like that. And most of those types of departments have been completely cut from these major sort of tech companies. So I think, look, I'm a grassroots person, so like I always believe that these things kind of come from the bottom up, and my hope is that we're seeing that kind of energy coming
Mm.
from workers at these companies. Even in my home state here in Washington, in Microsoft, there's been a number of, there's been a lot of layoffs. There's also been protests related
Mm.
to Microsoft sharing information with like the Israeli military, and a number of protests coming from employees of Microsoft. And just yesterday there was an announcement from Microsoft that they were going to change up their policies of surveillance, that kind of that they were providing support to the Israeli military. So it's like these small victories, right? Like
Yeah.
it's pushing back, and at first you're the enemy and you're the problem and the
Yeah.
disruption, and eventually people start to see maybe you're onto something. And my hope is that that will change the direction of some of these leaders at some of these companies.
Yeah, it is absolutely astounding. I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and I suspect if you're watching right now, you've been plugged in for a while. I mean, we're all old enough to remember when it was Twitter, and before it turned into a haven for Nazis. I mean, Mecha Hitler didn't just pop out of anywhere.
Right.
All right. And I don't think I can't. Did Linda Yaccarino, did she quit before or after Mecha Hitler? I can't remember.
I know, right?
It's like you guys, come on, seriously.
Yes. I
I
know.
just, my God. Um, So, Shasti, let me ask you. There's, I mean, we have these immediate elections here, but there also is, such a longer focus on the midterms, because that could be a deciding factor on whether we. I mean, I don't mind saying it, whether we stay a democracy. All right,
Yes.
that's, I mean, based on everything we have seen from this second Trump administration, what are the Democrats doing differently
Hmm.
to get folks and to make sure to win in 26?
Well, I give a lot of credit to our new DNC chair, Ken Martin, who has already been an incredible leader, and had been the chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party for 14 years before he came to become DNC chair. And so already, Ken understands the importance of infrastructure in the states and how important it is to be on the ground and allowing for, sort of authentic local messaging to take root. And, I think in years past, there was definitely a real sort of like, Beltway DC consultant mentality that, there'd be folks in a room back in DC that would be like, well, and the farmers in Iowa, we think they should talk about this, or we think that they think this, and we've looked at the facts and figures. And that, is so not what Ken is about and what this new DNC is. It really is about empowering the states and allowing for leadership to come kind of from the ground up. Ken has shifted an investment where now, across all 57 state parties and territories, $1 million is going out every single month from the DNC to help state parties with their elections. We've got 1,000 local elections that are happening this year, which will, as we talked about with the Virginia and New Jersey races, helping with testing messaging, new organizing tools, really leaning into relational organizing, which is the fact that people are more likely to participate and vote if their friends and family are doing it and talking about why they care, why these elections matter to them, more so than, you got a stranger who, calls you out of the blue, or a text message, you get a random text message. And so there's a lot more investment, directly into that type of organizing. And, I think on paper, the 2024 strategy was to really put all the sort of attention into the 7 battleground states. And I think what we have really learned is that it doesn't just stay, these things don't stay in one state, and it really matters that we are, fighting hard and doing everything we can in every state. Obviously there's a greater focus in these swing area districts and in the purple battleground states, but it matters that we're investing in red states. It matters that we are continuing to take lessons from what the blue states are doing and getting done. And I think you're seeing more work across the country amongst leadership from the blue states working together. Like on the West Coast, we have this new sort of Western States Health Alliance that is set our own guidance around vaccines because we didn't trust what was coming from the Trump administration. And you're seeing more kind of working together. And I think that's going to be really important as we head into the midterms and towards 2028.
Yeah, a lot going on.
Yeah. Yes.
Just a little bit.
Tom, when can we take a nap?
No.
Democracy.
I'll sleep in 2029.
Yeah, exactly.
Shasti, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Where can we find you? Where can we find your work?
Thanks so much for having me on. I am at Shasti Conrad on all social media platforms. And you can also follow the work that I'm doing in Washington State at wadems.org. And love to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thanks, Shasti. Thank you so much. And Mike unmuted. Hey guys, thanks for being here. Big thanks again to Shasti. Check that out. I swapped shirts. I'm just kidding. Pre-tape that. So much going on. Look, let me tell you, if you want to get in touch, you got somebody you'd like to see on air, you'd like to be a guest, drop me a note. Tom Lobianco Reports airs live Monday through Friday, noon, Substack, YouTube, and again at 8 p.m. on Political Voices Network. You got something you think I ought to be covering here, someone I should be talking to, go ahead and email me right there, Tom at 24site.news. Before we get out of here, a little heads up that tomorrow we're going to be talking with my colleague Julie Grace Brufke, taking a look at what to expect if there is a shutdown. Will there be a shutdown? And tomorrow is D-Day. Now, we've had a lot of these in the past. What's going to happen? Big meeting at the White House between Schumer, Jeffries, Johnson, Thune. The votes are tomorrow. Tomorrow. That is D-Day for shutdown. We're going to be hearing from Julie Grace on that. Let's take a look. Also, I want to talk about one thing that Shasti brought up, which had me thinking about this, about the algorithms and whatnot. I want to remind people of what happened over on X. Of the many things that have happened on that site. Because I think that this is important. I think it's important to remind people of things that have happened, any number of which would be shocking, all right, but so often get lost in mud of new, sometimes legitimately shocking, sometimes just fake social media attention grab crap, shock. Some of it's real. All right. And I want to go back to, let's take a look at Mecha Hitler here, because I think this is important. This is from The Guardian. Josh Taylor, technology reporter. Musk's AI firm forced to delete posts praising Hitler from Grok chatbot. The popular bot on X began making anti-Semitic comments in response to user queries. Oh, for God's sakes. Guardian, thank you. I'll throw in some money. Reminder, please throw in some money to me first here at 24 Site News. Then help support The Guardian. I really do appreciate The Guardian. They're incredible. Elon Musk's artificial intelligence firm xAI has deleted, quote, inappropriate post on X after the company's chatbot Grok began praising Adolf Hitler, referring to itself as Mecha Hitler and making anti-Semitic comments in response to user queries. In some now deleted posts, it referred to a person with a common Jewish surname as someone who was, quote, celebrating the tragic deaths of white kids in the Texas floods as, quote, future fascist. Quote, classic case of hate dressed as activism, and that surname every damn time, as they say, the chatbot commented. In another post, it said, Hitler, quote, Hitler would have called it out and crushed it, end quote. The Guardian has been unable to confirm if the account that was being referred to belonged to a real person or not. And media reports suggest it has now been deleted. In other posts, it referred to itself as, quote, Mecha Hitler, quote, the white man stands for innovation, grit, and not bending to PC nonsense, quote, Grok said in a subsequent post. All right, why am I bringing this up here? All right, why even bother with this? Because part of the way that things get fixed, and part of the way that you don't have one of the biggest platforms in the world spouting Hitler, or even referring to itself, whether ironically or not, as a genocidal evil maniac, is accountability. And oftentimes things move so fast that people don't come back to them. Hey, what happened with that? What's the latest? So I'm going to be developing something a little bit new here. I'm going to be calling it, and tell me what you think of it. If you like it, tell me if you love it. If you think it sucks, tell me if the title sucks. I'm going to be calling it the memory hole. This is the opposite of the memory hole, where things get lost to the inanity of the constant digital flood. This is a segment I'm going to be building which reminds us and puts it back on folks to answer questions like, oh, I don't know, why was your platform pushing Hitler? I'm going to be developing this as we go, usually towards the end of the show. Let's see. The show is growing, it is expanding, is developing. All right. I guarantee you there's no AI running this, thank God. Because if I plug this AI into the shit that I look at, it might come back with some crap like Mecha Hitler. Okay. It would not come back with oh man, what was her name? Tilly Norden Tilly, the AI superstar. That is unfortunately when you cover the news, that's not what you get if you plug in the AI. Okay. So I'm going to be developing this thing. Let me know what you think of it. All right. You can drop me an email again, Tom at 24site.news. Before we head out of here, I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors. Look, guys, I do this with your help. Thank you so much for being here. If you're not already and you're concerned about where we are, you're concerned about the White House attacking free speech, our bedrock principle here in America. If you're concerned and you don't want even the threat hanging over the head of any major news organization potentially dictating coverage, this is the way. Independent journalism. This is why I do this. It's why I started 24 Site News almost 2 years ago now. It's why I launched Tom LoBianco Reports about a month ago. To continue doing this, to continue bringing you the news in an unvarnished way. There's no sugarcoating here. Now we're going to be honest and we're going to rely on the facts to do this, but also no soft pedaling on this. Okay. So if you can, please make sure head on over to 24site.news. All right. You can find all my work over there. Okay. Head on over to 24site.news, become a paying subscriber, help support independent journalism. All right. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. First off, I want to say thanks to Beth Solomon. She is the author of From Fired to Fabulous. She is used to be a longtime speechwriter for a longtime Senator Sam Nunn, then moved up to the C-suite, has held a number of jobs, has also been fired from a number of jobs. Now, this is very important as we head into a potential second doging as the White House is threatened. All right. So look, we already had massive firings from the White House and Doge and Elon Musk at the beginning of the year. And if we go into a shutdown, the White House has promised they will be firing more people. All right. So what do you do? What do you do in this instance? Well, Beth wrote a book called From Fire to Fabulous, going through her experiences, and works as a very good manual, very solid. It's a brisk read to explain how do you pick yourself back up? All right. Look, this happens to everybody. All right. Like it or not, it happens. How do you get back on your feet? Whether that is getting back into your career, back into a 9 to 5, or starting out on your own. So check out Beth Solomon's book, From Fired to Fabulous. Very excellent read. All right. Super helpful, especially now. Unfortunately, especially now, as we continue to stare down more White House Donald Trump firings, potentially. All right, let's see. Let's see what happens tomorrow. I want to say a big thanks to my friend Manoj over at projectmanagemymove.com. All right. You guys might not have heard about this before, might not have known about it. I really didn't know about it before I talked with Manoj about this. What is a distress sale? In the housing industry and real estate, a distress sale is, unfortunately, if somebody dies in your family, you got a divorce, whatever, you got a lot going on and you have to take care of it. You got to take care of what's going on in your personal life. All right. Sometimes in the rush to put up a house, all right, on the market, you don't get the money that you need from this thing. All right. You don't get the full value of it. So what Manoj does over at Project Manage My Move is He actually works as the logistics guy. He'll bring in the contractors, even something as simple as just painting the place. All right. And then what he does, he works with the contractors to make it look nice, to improve, do some basic improvements to get the full value of the home so you can get the money you deserve on this thing. Okay. Sometimes that's tens of thousands of dollars more. All right. So head on over to projectmanagemymove.com. All right. Tell Manoj I sent you. All right. And thank you, Beth and Manoj, for supporting independent journalism. It's my honor to be here with you. It's my pleasure and privilege. I don't know what the portmanteau of those two is. All right. Almost came out. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to do a mashup of that, but it is my pleasure and my privilege to be here with you. But it's also our right. And I'm very happy to exercise our First Amendment rights together. All right, guys. I'll see you.